painting still overwhelms me. There is just so much to it, which makes it seem so intimidating. But I am determined to make it less scary for myself and for anyone who is also new to oil painting. So welcome to my oil painting vlog series. Today is more of a calm, laid-back video in which I explore prepping and practicing, starting with priming all my canvas boards. Now, after painting on 2 of these boards, I learned something very important. The surface prepping does matter and it can make a big difference. My first painting was actually on an unprimed canvas board. Well, these from the store come double or triple primed, but after researching, it's basically equal to an unprimed canvas. And I could tell while I love the texture, the pigments were definitely really absorbed, and it's just not professional to paint on an unprimed surface simply for archival reasons. So if you have unprimed paintings, the paint might actually eat through the canvas over time and rot the fibers. So that's one thing I learned. The second thing was this. Of course, the overthinker I am assumed I then need to go to the other extreme and put on 10 layers of gesso. And in my research, I also found that some realist painters love painting on the smoothest surface possible. And I mean, it does sound good, doesn't it? To have a perfectly smooth surface like paper. In theory, great for working on details, but the moment I painted on it, I immediately felt regret because the paint was just smearing on top of this zero texture board. It was not a pleasant experience for me personally, so this is a tip for you to try out different levels of texture. Now here I am preparing all these boards at once because it does take half a day to a day to prime, because you should put on at least 3 layers and let those dry for at least an hour in between. And this time I try to preserve as much of the canvas texture as possible. If you're wondering what I'm using, I linked everything in the description, and I tried 2 different acrylic gessos. The first one you saw was by Liquitex and the second one was from Golden. The Golden one was creamier and the Liquitex was more fluid, which I actually ended up liking more. Now you can of course thin them down to your own liking with water, but the Liquitex primer already has a very nice consistency for what I was looking for. I can make a separate video about canvas prepping in the future, but to keep it short here, after all the gesso layers are dry to the touch, I lightly sand them to get rid of uneven spots. And here you can see the difference of a primed and sanded surface on the left and the raw canvas board from the store on the right. You can clearly see how unfinished the store canvas looks and how sparingly they apply the primer. I'll give you an update on this in the future, but for now, I personally prefer a light to medium texture over a perfectly smooth surface. For the ball practice I'm about to start, I use oil painting paper, and I'm not priming it because, well, it's just a practice and not an actual artwork, and I don't want to waste a canvas board for it. I don't care if this deteriorates. I'm transferring the sketch onto the paper with oil paint, but before I start painting, I am reorganizing my painting mediums. Painting mediums are, again, something a lot of people will tell you it doesn't matter, just use linseed oil, you don't need all of this. But again, I am not so sure about that, because the more I researched about the characteristics of oil painting, the more I realized what a deep rabbit hole this actually is. Basically, and I'm sure you heard of this, but the most important rule is fat over lean, which also means slow drying over fast drying. Mineral spirits are the leanest, fast drying, and pure oils are the fattest, slow drying. But there's also a lot in between. A lot of artists like to mix their own painting medium for the in-between to end layers, which often consists of turpentine, Demar varnish, and stand oil. Mixing your own medium is something I'm looking into in the future, but for now I am so new to all of this that I have other priorities than to play chemist. So I got a few mediums to experiment with. I have 2 painting mediums from Winsor & Newton, which are both supposed to be good for blending and glazing. One is a bit thicker and supposedly fatter than the other. I have my refined linseed oil, which I might use for layers closer to the end. I just wanted to refill all of this in glass dropper bottles because it makes it easier to just get a few drops to work with very sparingly. So starting this little ball practice to tone the paper, I combined burnt sienna with a bit of odorless mineral spirits. I like burnt sienna because it has this strong orangey tone and it isn't too brown. I personally like this warm brown orange. I could have probably thinned it down a bit more, but to be honest, I like the strong color in the base. I apply it with a brush and then really rub it in with a shop towel. This evens the pigment and also thins out the surface more. Since I'm working right on top of it now, it also won't smudge too much with the paint. Now going in with burnt umber, I again thin it out with OMS just to map in the shadow areas. And again, I probably should or could have thinned it out a bit more. This is just a learning curve for me. Theoretically, I know this layer has to be very lean, thin, and fast drying. I don't know if you can see, but judging by the way I move and handle the brush, you can definitely tell I'm new to painting. I am very much transitioning from drawing to painting, which I am not used to at all. Another thing I want to mention is the brushes. This is again something people will say it really doesn't matter, just get a whole bunch of different sizes. But I don't agree. It really depends on your own preference and technique. For example, for rubbing in and blending pigment, I can really recommend getting these dry brushes you see me using right now. This makes such a difference compared to trying to blend with your regular round brush, especially working in layers like I'm doing here. And if you want to go for that blended look, I know everything has to be loose and painterly nowadays. But if you're like me, you don't want that and smoothing out the paint is more fun, try dry brushing. After this burnt umber layer, I let it dry for a day. If you're using earthy, thin down pigments, the drying time should be pretty fast, around 24 hours. And now I'm working with a grisaille, which is basically a black and white value painting on top. So I started with the light value, which is not white, although it looks like it, but I preserved the pure white for the spot highlights. Oh, and in this step, I'm actually using one of my painting mediums. I dipped a brush in it and then mixed that with the paint. This one is the blending and glazing medium by Winsor & Newton. I try to work the paint into the paper as thinly as I can, becoming even more thin at transitioning points. I personally don't enjoy applying paint in a very thick impasto way. I know that's very popular at the time, but I just have to listen to my guts and follow what's actually enjoyable for me. The last painting I did was a torture for me, and it was partially because of the alla prima approach, which means I basically painted it in one layer. After that, I researched more about different painting techniques, and I got really fascinated with the more traditional, like the old masters way, which involves a warm, earthy underpainting, this dead layer I'm painting right now, and then color glazes on top of that. So far, it is a process I enjoy much more because it also splits up the different aspects like value, hue, temperature, saturation into multiple layers. So it is actually easier than to paint it all in one go. The drawback though is that you have to let each layer dry. This black and white layer needs to dry at least a couple of days, if not a week. So that's just something I have to plan my content around in the future. What I like about this approach is that the warm underpainting can shine through like you see here. I like not covering up every bit of it, for example in the shadow areas, and I'm looking into experimenting more with that in the future. And with this layer complete, I actually make a cut here because, like I said, this has to dry for a couple of days and it's just practice anyway. I do have my next painting lined up already. It will be this small lemon here, so stay tuned to watch the process in a future video. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this little excursion into oil painting materials and techniques, and I hope you stay here with me so we can learn about oil painting together.